Welcome to The Explainer. Now, I want you to step back with me into a rather chilling moment in time. The year is 1952. We are in London, a sprawling, bustling metropolis still recovering from a world war. It's a city of massive industry and constant movement. But, in a matter of just days, this mighty capital is going to experience a disaster unlike absolutely anything the modern world had ever seen. And the crazy part? This wasn't from an invading army. And it wasn't from a sudden earthquake. This is the story of the Great Smog, the week when an entire city simply vanished into a deadly, suffocating shadow.
Just imagine waking up one morning, making your tea, and finding out your city is just gone. I don't mean destroyed, I don't mean leveled by bombs or washed away by floods. I mean completely, physically erased from your vision. Imagine walking out your front door into a void so incredibly thick and blinding that you literally cannot even see your own feet resting on the pavement. I mean, it sounds like the plot of a dystopian science fiction film, doesn't it? A nightmare where nature suddenly turns against humanity. But this wasn't fiction. For millions of Londoners, this became their terrifying everyday reality, an inescapable trap that descended seemingly out of absolutely nowhere.
Section 1. A normal winter morning and the illusion of safety.
To really understand how this happened, we have to look at the environment of the era. Look, Londoners in the 1950s were very much used to fog. It was familiar, expected even. You know that romanticized Dickensian mist that rolls off the River Thames, blending with the smoke of millions of tiny coal fires heating terraced homes? But what was about to hit them was no ordinary mist. It was thick, it was yellow, and it was suffocating. People colloquially called it a pea souper, but in reality it was a highly toxic soup of sulfur dioxide and soot. And here is the truly, absolutely crucial point. The people living through those first few hours, they had no idea they were crossing the threshold from a mild, everyday inconvenience into a historic catastrophe.
Section 2. The fog thickens. December 5th, 1952.
So what actually triggered this unprecedented event? Well, it was a completely invisible meteorological phenomenon. An unusual anticyclone settled directly over the city, creating what's called a temperature inversion. This basically trapped cold, stagnant air, along with millions of tons of coal smoke, right down on the streets. And the deterioration was incredibly rapid. In the morning, it just looked like ordinary fog. People went off to work, kids walked to school, everything seemed pretty normal. But by the afternoon, it became thicker and thicker. The color actually began to shift to this sickly yellow-brown, and by the evening, visibility was reduced to mere feet. The fog had completely choked the streets, trapping citizens exactly wherever they happened to be. The city didn't just slow down, the visual world literally evaporated.
Section 3. A city paralyzed as society grinds to a halt.
Try to picture the sheer claustrophobia of this exact moment. A massive, modern metropolis suddenly stripped of its ability to function. The scale of the logistical failure was absolute. Those famous red double-decker buses, they completely stopped running. The roads were totally impassable, which caused drivers to just abandon their cars right in the middle of the street. Trains stopped dead on their tracks. Every single flight in and out of the city was canceled. And get this, the yellow-black haze was so incredibly dense, it actually penetrated closed doors. Even inside indoor movie theaters, the smoke was so thick that audiences were blinded. They literally could not see the screens from their seats. Concerts were shut down. The city's heartbeat flatlined.
But perhaps nothing captures the sheer desperation of those days quite like this specific detail. The fog became so impenetrable that ambulances couldn't even drive. Emergency services were rendered entirely useless in a time of severe crisis. Instead, police officers literally had to walk on foot ahead of crawling ambulances, holding flashlights and flares, trying to guide them step by step through the blacked-out streets. Just imagine that for a second. The eerie glow of a single flashlight desperately fighting against a suffocating wall of toxic yellow smog. It was desperate, it was dark, and it was deeply, deeply ominous.
Section 4. The silent killer. The unseen threat.
As terrifying as that logistical nightmare was, the true horror was unfolding quietly behind closed doors. It forces us to ask a really profound question. What happens when the air itself turns poisonous? We totally take our breath for granted, don't we? It is the most fundamental requirement for human survival. When you strip away shelter, well, you can survive for days. Without water, perhaps a week. But without clean air, you only have minutes. For the first couple of days, the authorities just treated this as a severe weather nuisance. They had absolutely no idea they were facing a deadly medical crisis. The very thing keeping the citizens of London alive was slowly killing them from the inside out.
And this unseen killer? It did not discriminate, not even a little. The victims came from every walk of life. Children, whose lungs were obviously still developing, elderly citizens who were already vulnerable to respiratory issues, but also healthy, strapping young adults. The air was so toxic that even prize-winning farm animals at the Smithfield show literally suffocated in their pens. As the days dragged on, thousands of people became trapped inside their own homes, just gasping for breath. Hospitals were completely overwhelmed. They rapidly ran out of beds, and doctors had to watch helplessly as patients poured in, their lips turning blue, desperately fighting for air.
The final human cost was, frankly, staggering: 12,000. Initially, the government estimated that around 4,000 people had died, but modern researchers, looking back at the mortality rates in the weeks and months that followed, realized the horrifying truth. By the time the smog finally lifted and the anticyclone broke to let the winds return, the resulting death toll was over 12,000 people. 12,000 lives extinguished by the very air they breathed. This cemented the Great Smog as one of the absolute deadliest environmental disasters in all of recorded history.
Section 5. Changing the World. The Aftermath. A tragedy of this magnitude absolutely could not be ignored. The Great Smog lifted, the skies cleared, but the psychological and political landscape of Britain was permanently altered. From this massive catastrophe came monumental change. First, a completely shocked nation demanded action. They refused to let the government just sweep that massive death toll under the rug. And this led directly to a real game changer, the landmark passage of the Clean Air Act of 1956. This was revolutionary. It introduced smoke control areas, relocated power stations, and even offered subsidies to families to switch from coal to cleaner heating methods. And finally, global pollution regulations were born. Cities around the entire world took notice. The legal frameworks that protect the air we breathe today, right now, across the globe, trace their roots directly back to those dark days in December 1952.
No bombs, no earthquakes, no floods, just air. And yet it killed thousands. Because sometimes, history's deadliest disasters are completely invisible. It's a haunting reminder, isn't it? As we look back at the week London vanished, we really must ask ourselves about the unseen environmental threats that might surround us today. The air we breathe is a shared inheritance, and protecting it is quite literally a matter of life and death. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.